Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Center for Naval Analysis in Northern Virginia to talk to our good friend Sam Bendett, who mines all things Russian military, but also Russian unmanned systems. Sam, great to see you. I'm sorry we didn't see you a little bit earlier in the month when the big victory parade happened.
That's quite all right. It was indeed a very big parade. A lot of things were shown. Russians started the parade with a World War II vintage tank, as they are now doing. They showed new tanks, new armored vehicles. They showed their missiles, long range, short range. There was a little snag, however. The weather was bad on that day, and there was no aerial portion of the parade, which probably was unfortunate for many people gathered on the Red Square.
That's right, because you know, anybody who's been in Red Square knows what a vast space it is, but it's an incredibly impressive parade, and everybody always looks forward to the flyby. Absolutely. And that's where a lot of new systems, of course, are unveiled. Also, what was the tank that led the parade? Was it a T-34?
It was a T-34, and of course, World War II celebration is a very big deal in Russia. The victory came at a very heavy price. Now, these parades are a reminder of Russia's connection to history. The government wants to make sure that the young people and the next generation remembers the incredible sacrifice made by that society. There are many parades just like that one that take place across the country in towns small and large. In fact, some small towns, for example, can have a parade almost made entirely of World War II vehicles and tanks, and this actually happened. And then there were other parades in larger cities across the country, and some technology was shown there that actually wasn't shown in Moscow, surprisingly.
And walk us through some of the systems that were demonstrated, right? Russia, just like the Soviet Union, always used to love the opportunity to show off the newest stuff at these parades. I'll also point out that what is really impressive about Russian youth is, you know, when you get married, you go to your city's memorial to lay flowers down for people who lost their lives in the Great Patriotic War. Talk to us about some of the systems that were unveiled that you saw that caught your interest, both on the manned but also on the unmanned side.
So on the Red Square, there were no unmanned systems, in contrast to last year's parade, where we saw ground vehicles and some unmanned aerial vehicles. This year, we saw the T-14 Armata tanks, we saw the armored vehicles and the armored personnel carriers. We saw technologies that were tested in Syria, like the Typhoon armored vehicle and the personnel carrier. We saw long-range missiles, kind of your usual staple. So there was no big difference between this year's parade and last year's parade when it comes to main systems. Next year would be the 75th anniversary of the victory of Russia over Germany in World War II, and I think that parade will definitely be much larger and will feature many more diverse systems.
And so what was, and obviously, right, 75th anniversary next year is going to be the biggest celebration, especially at a time when veterans are dying off at a rate of about 1,200 a day. It's you know, hopefully there'll be enough to be able to commemorate that important milestone. Talk to us about some of the unmanned systems that were displayed, particularly in the Far East, right?
Right. So we saw none of the unmanned systems in Moscow. It was a conscious decision by the MOD. But for example, in the Far East, Orlan 10 was on display. In other smaller parades across Russia, the unmanned ground vehicles were also on display. So there was a little bit of everything for people to see across the country, even if they were unable to travel to Moscow or if they did not want to tune into the main parade. But there were dozens and dozens of these parades, and they were very interesting.
And tell the audience a little bit about Orlan for those people who don't know what that system is.
So an Orlan 10 is a mainstay Russian UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle. It's got an operational range of about 120 kilometers. Russians have used it extensively in Syria and in other conflicts. It forms about half of the total UAV force in Russia, and you probably see it in pictures if you want to Google Russian unmanned aerial vehicles. It's this kind of gray, small airplane-looking UAV that has really shown itself to be a workhorse of the Russian UAV fleet. It's an ISR drone, so it's manufactured mostly to see and to record data to pass to the command center. Russians are probably going to work on different versions of that UAVs to make it combat, but right now it's a mainstay that is the eyes and the ears of the Russian military in conflicts.
And talk to us a little bit about Army 2019. That's the very, very big show that's going to be happening just next month.
Correct. Usually Army 2019 Military Expo takes place in August. This year it's been moved to June. It will feature tens of thousands of exhibits of Russian and foreign military technologies. Russia invites the world to exhibit outside of Moscow. And so there will be hundreds of thousands of visitors and many international delegations, including many foreign and defense ministries. Part of the Army 2019 Military Expo are a series of exercises and expositions of actual technology. So you will see various races between the tanks and the armored vehicles. There will be displays of aircraft, displays of unmanned systems. There will be a lot of roundtable discussions, both public and classified, about achievements of the Russian military and ways going forward. And Russia is building out Army 2019 as the go-to military expo in the country and one of the most influential such events around the world.
I always love the Russian demonstrations, because whether it's an air demonstration or a ground demonstration, they tend to be a little bit more aggressive than everybody else. Seeing T-72s sliding around like pigs on ice is always a pretty neat thing. Talk to us a little bit about Syria and Russian activities there and any unmanned developments. You know, it sort of slipped from the headlines, but folks, you know, the Russians are still there, Americans are there. There are still operations that are ongoing, even if ISIS itself has been sort of defeated for now, even though it's a group that flows like water and can reconstitute itself very quickly. You know, any developments and anything new going on that front on the Russian side?
So when it comes to UAVs, Russia has admitted that its Okhotnik unmanned combat vehicle has undergone a series of short flight tests. The jumps over the runway, basically when the UAV rises above the ground for a few meters and lands. This UCAV is the largest and the heaviest that Russia is developing. It's shaped like a flying wing. It's got stealth technology. It's supposed to weigh 20 tons and carry several tons of cargo. Its stealthy technology allows it to be potentially an air defense penetrator. But this wasn't seen in Syria quite yet. What Russians have used in Syria are the technologies I mentioned previously, like the Orlan UAV, some of the smaller systems, and some of the systems that are a bit larger, like the four-post, mostly to see and to record data in real time. And Russians are continuing to build on that. There were some rumors that perhaps an Orion UAV was sighted there in tests. This is also a new unmanned aerial vehicle that will be manufactured in a ISR and a combat capacity. But the biggest news right now is Okhotnik. And Okhotnik will actually be displayed at the Army 2019. So I'm sure it will draw a lot of people and a lot of interest, as it will be a very photogenic display, this massive flying wing UCAV, and thousands of people gathered around it. Russia is billing this as one of their achievements. They're rushing to get this completed. It was supposed to be in service by this year, so there's pressure on the manufacturers to actually prove that this system is airworthy and can be accepted into service in the coming years. Once that system is part of the Russian military, then some of the equations related to the Russian military concept of operations and tactics will have to change, because Russia will gain a very interesting and a very capable aerial vehicle. At the same time, it will have to test it in combat. So if Okhotnik is actually accepted into service in the coming years, and there's combat in Syria, we may see this heavy unmanned combat aerial vehicle in action in Syria, just like we've seen with some of the smaller ISR UAVs they're using today.
We will be back next month, even though you're not going to be, and we're not going to be, unfortunately, at Army 2019. We're going to look forward to talking to you for the after action, so that you can give us play-by-play game, color commentary.
I look forward to it.
Sam Bendett of the Center for Naval Analysis. Sam, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Always. Thank you very much.